let's start with Fox News. This is my question today. Can American democracy survive Fox News? There's the headline, the headline over at HartmannReport.com. You know, how can a democratic republic balance the need for a free and independent press with the pressure of fascism-loving billionaires buying and controlling large chunks of that sector, of the media sector? I mean, we are in the midst, it appears, of a genuine renewal in America. We are recovering from 3 years of a pandemic. Our middle class has been staggering for 42 years under Reagan's neoliberalism, and we're recovering from that. We're rejecting the efforts of Republican neo-fascists in the mold of Donald Trump. It looks like we're on the edge of an egalitarian, a small d democratic renaissance. And, you know, some of the more well-known observers of the cycles of history agree. Neil Howe has a new book coming out. It drops on July 18th, just roughly a month from now. 1 week before my new book. His book is called The Fourth Turning Is Here. Mine is The Hidden History of Democracy, Rediscovering Humanity's Ancient Way of Living. Both of them available for pre-order, although I don't mean this as a pitch. Just, you know, there's some good books coming out. Another one is Peter Turchin's new book, which just came out. In fact, it released yesterday. It's titled The End Times, Elites, Counter-Elites, and the Path of Political Disintegration. Turchin has written extensively about the cycles of history, and I have quoted both of them in my own work. So, you know, it seems like America and much of the rest of the world are waking up. And, you know, possibly a new day is upon us. But how do we get the word out? How do we have a functioning democracy in a country where much of the media is controlled by right-wing billionaires who are distorting the message? I mean, this is a real challenge. Can democracy survive Fox News? Jefferson once wrote, you know, the basis of our government being the opinion of the people, the very first object should be to keep that right. And were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. Indeed, newspapers, we need them. But half the newspapers in America right now are owned by a handful of hedge funds. In fact, most of them are owned by one hedge fund or vulture fund or whatever you call it, based out of New York. Half the local newspapers in America. And the hedge fund has a right-wing slant. Yesterday, or day before yesterday, when Joe Biden was speaking on television, the Chiron on Fox News said, in all caps, wannabe dictator speaks at the White House after having his political rival arrested. Now, Fox has released a statement saying we're doing something about this, or words to that effect. What the hell does that mean? I don't know. But it's not even remotely a depiction of reality. The United States had the worst rate of COVID deaths, unnecessary COVID deaths, let me add, in the developed world. One of the worst rates in the entire world. And I think you can lay an awful lot of that at the feet of Fox News and other right-wing media that promoted distrust of our government. So not only does right-wing media not depict reality, not only do they distort our politics, not only do they promote fascism, but it's deadly. 500,000 Americans died unnecessarily of COVID, in large part because of right-wing media. So what do we do about this? Well, you know, Rupert Murdoch started his little empire in Australia, and then after he had ruined Australian politics, he moved on to the United Kingdom, bought a bunch of newspapers there, and pushed through Brexit and got right-wingers elected to the British government over and over and over again. And then he came to the United States, and Ronald Reagan expedited his in the 80s, expedited his citizenship so that he could open television stations and roll out Fox so-called news. So so let's go back to Australia and see what they have to say about it. Kevin Rudd was the Prime Minister of Australia for a number of years, and he, a couple years back, wrote a piece for the Australian edition, version of the New York Times. It's called the Sydney Morning Herald. It's their biggest national newspaper. And he wrote, just very bluntly, Hang on just a second, let me find it here. I don't have it. Okay. Kevin Rudd just laid it out anyway in his piece. Oh, here it is. He says, Australian politics has become vicious, toxic, and unstable. But on top of all of and he says, the core question is why? And then he answers. He says, on top of all of the above, while manipulating each of them has been Rupert Murdoch, the greatest cancer on the Australian democracy. Now, this is the former Prime Minister of Australia speaking. Murdoch is not just a news organization, Rudd writes. Murdoch operates as a political party acting in pursuit of clearly defined commercial interests in addition to his far-right ideological worldview. James Murdoch, the son of Rupert Murdoch, told the Financial Times, and I quote, "The sacking of the Capitol is proof positive that what we thought was dangerous is indeed very much so. It's the propagate lies to their audience have unleashed insidious and uncontrollable forces that will be with us for years." Now, he's not the one who runs Fox News. That's his brother, Lachlan, who he appears to be calling out in this quote. But frankly, the Murdoch empire in the United States, Fox News, the New York Post, Fox television stations all over the country, the Wall Street Journal, that's really only the second most toxic news source in this country. The first is frankly, Facebook, because their algorithm, is a secret. And more than 40% of Americans get their news from Facebook. And yet, Facebook has been an organizing central for everything from January 6th to racist attacks to, they caused a mass slaughter, a race-based genocide in Myanmar, what we used to call Burma. So what do we do about this? There's people out there saying we should censor the media. No, you don't want to censor the media. I agree with Jefferson. If we had to choose between newspapers or government, I'd choose newspapers too. So what do we do? And by the way, as a warning about censorship, when the Nazis took over Germany, there were 4,700 independent newspapers. By 1944, it was down to a little over 1,000, and none of them were criticizing the Nazis. And the 325 official regional Nazi newspapers had a circulation of 21 million, while all the other newspapers in the country combined were only 4.4 million. We don't want that to happen here. So what do we do? Both sidesism reporting doesn't work. This is the great lesson that Chris Licht and CNN discovered. When you try, when you've got one political party in a two-party system that is devoted to fascism, that uses lies to promote their own political power, and you try to do both sides journalism. Oh, let's listen to the Democrat. Let's listen to the Republican. But the Republican is lying and the Democrat is generally telling the truth. How can you do that? How can you call that news? How can people be informed as a result of that? They're not. So it's a struggle. So what do we do? Well, Finland has taken a unique approach to this. They are teaching in literally from kindergarten through 12th grade, or their equivalent. They're teaching media literacy, how to spot lies and disinformation. I think we should do the same. I guarantee you it'll bring squeals of outrage from the right-wingers who depend on lies and misinformation for their political power. But screw them. We should do it anyway. 40% of Americans don't believe the results of the 2020 election. Half of Republicans think Democrats drink children's blood. This is how weird it's gotten. We have a crisis. There is literally no corollary to that. You cannot identify a weird belief that Democrats have about Republicans that isn't verifiable. And if I'm wrong on that, call and point it out to me. Please, Republicans who are listening, I know you're out there. You've got Republicans talking about Democrats drinking kids' blood and the 2020 election was stolen. Both, lies, fantasies promoted for political purposes. Are Democrats doing anything like that? I can't find anything. So what do we do? Number one, we need literacy training, media literacy. Number two, force our antitrust laws and break up some of these giant media monopolies, particularly the ownership of radio stations, television stations, and local newspapers. It's crazy that half our local newspapers are controlled by one company or two or three companies. Finally, I think that the news industry could take a cue from science and medicine and have the equivalent of a peer review process. The Society of Professional Journalists might be a good group that could take this on, or ProPublica or somebody like that. Democracy is based on the will of the people, as not just Jefferson, but most of the founders pointed out. And yet the will of the people cannot function if the people don't have clear, clean, honest information. We've got to do something about this. It's going to take a lot of work, but it will be absolutely worth it. The time and effort will be rewarded with a functioning democratic republic if we do something about this crisis of the media in the United States. Up next, will the new Republican plan to defund the FBI succeed? And a sneaky billionaire alert. Stay with us. We'll be right back.